priest walks into a hospital room, the family assumes exactly what decades of movies have trained everyone to assume. This means the end has arrived. Someone is calling in the church because death is only minutes away. Except that's not actually what Catholic teaching requires at all. Waiting until someone's final breaths to call a priest may mean missing most of the actual point of what the church is offering. In fact, if you've only ever pictured this moment happening seconds before death, you've misunderstood a sacrament the church intends people to receive considerably earlier than that. So what exactly are last rites? Is that even the real name of anything? How sick does someone actually have to be? And when death really is close, is anointing even the main thing the church considers most important? Here's the first surprise. Last Rites was never the formal name of one single Catholic sacrament at all. It's a popular umbrella phrase covering several distinct things that might happen for someone seriously ill or dying, not one uniform ritual performed identically every time. Depending on the person's condition, that care might include confession if the person is able, the anointing of the sick, Holy Communion given in a specific way reserved for someone near death, and prayers offered for the dying. Movies collapsed several different Catholic realities into one dramatic image of a priest making the sign of the cross over a hospital bed. The real practice is considerably richer and considerably less rigid than that single scene suggests. To understand how the misconception took hold in the first place, you need the sacrament's older name, extreme unction, meaning roughly the final anointing. For centuries, that name itself, combined with a pastoral custom of usually calling for it only when death seemed genuinely close, cemented the exact assumption this video opened with. Then the Second Vatican Council addressed this directly. Its own documents state plainly that the sacrament, better called the anointing of the sick, is not intended only for those at the very point of death, and that the appropriate time to receive it arrives as soon as a person begins to be in danger due to illness or old age. Pope Paul VI formalized this reoriented emphasis in 1972, updating the sacrament's ritual to match. This wasn't inventing a new sacrament or reversing ancient doctrine. It was correcting a narrowed pastoral habit that had grown up around a much older, broader sacrament. So who actually qualifies? Current church law describes it plainly: a baptized Catholic who has reached the use of reason and has begun to be in danger due to illness or old age. Notice how carefully that's worded. It isn't anyone who feels a little unwell. An ordinary cold doesn't qualify. But it also isn't only someone actively dying. The real standard sits between those two extremes. A genuinely serious, dangerous condition, not necessarily an imminent one. That raises the obvious next question. What about surgery? Anointing before an operation is genuinely permitted, but the detail people usually miss is what actually triggers it. It isn't the surgery itself as a procedure. It's whether the underlying illness making that surgery necessary is itself serious enough to place the person in danger. Routine, low-risk procedures generally don't qualify on their own. A serious, dangerous condition requiring major surgery can. What about simply being elderly? There's no specific birthday that flips a switch, but church guidance does allow anointing for elderly people who've become noticeably weakened, even without a single newly diagnosed illness driving that decline. It isn't every senior citizen automatically qualifies. It's old age itself has become the dangerous condition, which is a narrower, more specific standard than a blanket age cutoff. Here's a detail that should genuinely undercut the whole idea of a single final ritual. This sacrament can be received more than once. If someone recovers from a serious illness and later becomes seriously ill again, they can be anointed again. If their condition simply worsens during the same illness, they can be anointed again even without any recovery in between. Whatever Last Rites implies in popular imagination, a sacrament you can validly receive multiple times across a single hospital stay clearly was never designed as a single, unrepeatable finale. What if the person can't respond at all? Unconsciousness doesn't automatically rule it out. Current church law permits anointing an unconscious person if there's reasonable basis to believe they would have asked for it themselves, while still in control of their faculties. The same logic underlying countless ordinary pastoral judgment calls made at bedsides every day. Then there's the scenario every priest dreads getting called to. Arriving to find the family says the person has just died. Sacraments are for the living. A person who is certainly definitively dead isn't anointed because the church holds this is a sacrament that cannot be given after death has genuinely occurred. But church law addresses exactly the murkier, more common situation directly. Genuine doubt about whether death has actually taken place. In cases of real uncertainty, a priest may administer the sacrament conditionally. Be careful here, because popular Catholic folklore likes to attach a specific number of minutes to this rule, as though there's an official window ticking down after apparent death. There isn't. Canon law speaks of genuine doubt, not a stopwatch. Only a priest or bishop can validly administer this particular sacrament at all. Unlike some other forms of pastoral care a deacon or layperson might offer. Now, what does the sacrament actually claim to do for someone receiving it? Catholic teaching describes effects centered on strengthening the person spiritually, offering peace and courage in facing serious illness, and uniting their suffering with Christ's own. Under specific circumstances, when someone genuinely cannot access confession, anointing can also bring forgiveness of sins, provided the person has proper interior disposition. And the Church does teach that the sacrament may, in a way conducive to the good of the person's soul, contribute to restored physical health. Be careful not to overread that last point. This isn't a Catholic promise of miraculous healing, and it was never meant to function as an alternative to actual medical care. So if this sacrament isn't necessarily the very last thing that happens before death, what actually is? Here's likely the single biggest reveal in this entire story. When a Catholic is genuinely approaching death, the sacrament the Church treats with the deepest urgency isn't anointing at all. It's Holy Communion, received in a specific context the Church calls Viaticum, Latin for provision for the journey. Church law goes so far as to say the faithful in danger of death should receive this Eucharist, even if they already received communion earlier that same day. It's the sacrament most explicitly oriented toward the final passage from this life, framed quite literally as food for the road ahead. There's one more piece sometimes included, worth mentioning briefly without letting it crowd out everything else. The Apostolic pardon, a specific blessing carrying an indulgence offered to someone at the point of death. It isn't sacramental confession, and it isn't anointing either. It's a distinct, separate act of the Church's care for someone in their final moments. None of this is a modern invention dressed up as ancient tradition. The letter of James, one of the oldest documents in the New Testament, instructs sick believers to call for the elders of the Church, who are to pray over them and anoint them with oil. That image, elders gathering around someone seriously ill, praying and anointing, appears astonishingly early in Christian history, centuries before any of the precise sacramental vocabulary this video has used even existed. So how did an ancient practice meant for the seriously ill quietly narrow in popular imagination into something reserved for someone's final seconds? Partly through that older name, extreme unction, and partly through generations of pastoral habit that leaned toward calling a priest only once a family felt there was truly nothing left to lose. And that habit created a real, understandable fear that still lingers today. Families sometimes hesitate to call a priest at all, worried that doing so is itself an admission that a loved one is dying, as though summoning the church means everyone has already given up. That fear is the misunderstanding this entire story has been slowly dismantling. A priest's arrival was never supposed to mean the end has definitely come. It was always meant to mean the church believes someone seriously ill deserves this care now, not held in reserve until the very last possible moment. So picture that hospital room from the beginning one more time. The priest walks in. The family exchanges worried glances, certain about what his presence means. It doesn't have to mean what they think. Last Rites was never really the name of one final ritual held in reserve for someone's last seconds of life. It's a phrase that quietly taught generations of Catholics to wait for something the church never intended to exist, only in those final seconds at all. Thank you for spending this time uncovering this story with me. There are so many misunderstood pieces of Catholic care and tradition hiding behind familiar phrases, still waiting to be found. If you'd like to keep discovering them, consider subscribing to Sacred Heart, because there are many more stories like this one still waiting to be told.